Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Emily Harveaux is a returning guest on our show. Be sure to check out her first appearance on episode 424 of Boundless Body Radio, titled Special Episode, Amazing Stories from the Attendees of Low Carb Denver 2023. Emily is absolutely famous for being our first unannounced and unplanned podcast guest, as Emily and her husband unintentionally jumped into a podcast episode I was recording with our mutual friends Buz and Bruce at the time of our episode in the lobby of the 2023 Low Carb Denver Conference, where she briefly shared her amazing story. Emily Harveaux is a passionate health coach, educator, and mentor to those seeking to improve their lives. She has lost over 150 pounds through fasting and following the carnivore diet. Emily empowers others to find success through sharing the key components of metabolic healing and self-love. I also encountered Emily at KetoCon 2023 and a presentation titled Priming Feasting and Fasting, which was done with fellow coach Raymond Nazon, who we recently hosted on episode 468 of Boundless Body Radio, was absolutely fantastic. You can find Emily on Instagram at Healed by Me. Emily Harveaux, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Oh, so happy to be here. I just love your vibe, your energy. I've noticed you a long time ago. And so I noticed when I saw you at Low Carb Denver, I saw you had your signature kind of hat turned to the side. I'm like, hey, I know that guy. And so it's just been a pleasure. The more and more time we've gotten to be together, you were so supportive and incredible at KetoCon. You gave me that boost. I mean, the whole experience gave me the boost, just being there and being able to present and be in these carnivore panel discussions and everything. But your feedback afterward, it just like, I was flying high as a kite. And then it just like was a resounding confirmation that we are changing lives. We are making a difference. And so I have just appreciated seeing your supportive, smiling face in all these different arenas that we've been in so far.
Well, I love your energy as well. Thank you so much for the kind words. And it's nice to welcome you to the show a little bit more formally. Like I said, when we were at Low Carb Denver, we were just walking by in the hall and I did not bring any of my podcast, equipment. It's heavy and I was driving. And so it would have been tough to set everything up. So I was just recording on a phone. And you also saw our amazing friends, Buz and Bruce, and sat down and started chatting and was like, great, we've got 2 more people we can interview. And just to hear a little bit of your story is absolutely incredible. And I'm still lit up by these conferences that we've been able to go to this year. Are you still on fire from going to these?
Absolutely. And I love what like you and James are doing on the aftermath of it. We did a watch party in James's network where we got to kind of review the video that Raymond and I had put together. And so I think, and then gosh, Reversed came out. And so there's just been so much compounding. We're getting so much media now. Dr. Chafee was on 60 Minutes. And, it's just so cool to see that this is really the front edge and it's bursting and people's stories are continuing to get out there and changing the world. So yeah, I'm still completely buzzed from those experiences.
It's amazing. I talked with Scott Maslinski about this, how we were at KetoCon 2023. KetoCon's tough because you have to pick and choose. There's so much going on all the time. You can't just go to every little thing. You can watch videos afterwards, but you have to pick and choose. And I'm so glad I went to your presentation. But me and Scott were talking, like, can you imagine 5 years ago that you would fill an entire room 15 minutes early at the end of a conference to talk about carnivore diets for women's health? I was 15 minutes early. I had to sit on the floor. I counted over 200 women and people interested in the topic. And what an amazing experience. And to think like not that long ago, that would never have happened.
We are bursting and we are, the same thing I noticed at Denver as well, is that anytime carnivore was mentioned, there was so much energy and support in the room. And so it's just this is a testimony to the healing that people are happening. People, you cannot shut up about that. It is such an exciting, invigorating experience. And so, yeah, I agree completely. And I think that probably at these conferences that we're going to see more and more main stage. I think we're seeing what happens is that when we put carnivore in boxes, the boxes, we tend to explode out of those boxes and tend to have, standing room only. You're right. At that women's carnivore panel, just the energy of how many people were there. And gosh, Raymond and I in our talk too, we had a lot of people that were so supportive of carnivore, people that were there from SBG that we've been coaching for a long time to have relationships with. And so it was kind of funny, Casey, it felt a little bit rock starish, I guess. And we're all on the same team, we're all on this like team of taking a look at what a meat-based diet can do for people. And it's just such a passionate theme.
Yeah, definitely. And you could notice it at both conferences, but I would say KetoCon was a little bit more consumer driven. And again, this is just observation, but I observed the same thing that you did, that people were gravitating towards everything, not just keto, but actually carnivore. The biggest crowds, the biggest lines, all the people that got the most attention, it really seemed like it was in that realm. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see, that show rebrand into something different and to see whether the energy picks up somewhere else with it more specific in the carnivore space. You never know.
Agreed. I noticed the lines for Dr. Baker and Dr. Berry. They just never stopped. And they were both so wonderful just to spend that time taking pictures, answering questions, congratulating people. And I would notice Dr. Baker, wherever he would go, he would kind of stand and a line would just form for people that wanted to thank him for his support. It's wonderful.
And it's so cool that they would actually take the time to spend time with everybody. It's not like they were just signing a quick signature and here you go. It was like they were, BSing with people and talking about their stories. And they're just everybody in the space, in my opinion, that I've experienced has been so kind, so supportive, so wonderful. And you deserve to feel like a rock star after all your work in this space. And after that amazing presentation, you guys did so good.
Thank you.
Well, I want to go back and tell your original story. Like we mentioned in the introduction, you have lost and maintained a weight loss of 150 pounds, which is quite impressive. So I want to talk more about like kind of what led up to that. Sometimes I don't know, we get a little judgmental and we see people are big and we think to ourselves something like, how could you let yourself get to that level? And I don't think we fully appreciate what it's like to just feel like you are failing. You're trying the advice, you're trying the diets, it's not working for you, and it's just going in the wrong direction. I would love to talk about that journey for you into unhealth. Did you always have a struggle with your weight?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that by the time I had gotten back up to that weight, had been up to 300 pounds several times, I think that there was, I actually had given up and I don't, it's like part of me feels like that was the appropriate response to the information that I was given and to the experience that I was given. And, part of me feels like just coming out of the guidelines, the programs, what we're taught in our doctor's office, that I felt so hopeless. But given that those were the tools that I was giving, it kind of was hopeless. It kind of is hopeless if you're following the standard advice that's out there. And it's so effort based, and it kind of would cost everything in your life to have this goal of like being thin or being healthy. And so to me, I just had a lot of periods of time where I'm just like, I'm just going to accept this. And so I don't feel like that was completely inaccurate, because it took finding out the root cause to me to actually find something that was going to work, and wasn't only going to work, was going to stick. But yeah, my journey absolutely was carb addiction, sugar addiction, overeating, and emotional eating from a very young age. And so this was just kind of programmed into me. My safe place was my relatives that had provided the security for me in my life, were also the relatives that it was eating donuts and pastries nonstop. It was actually in the church. And so the church is just filled with of trying to get people straightened out and living in good parts in certain areas of their life, but not giving good education about that food can be such an issue. So yeah, food was my comfort, absolutely, in kind of a chaotic background. And so I hit it from both approaches, because we have such of the emotional and psychological healing that we need to do on the journey as we figure out the correct food, learn how to not reach to food all the time. But the nutrition is so foundational as well. And so I was so fortunate to finally figure that out in my mid 40s, having that figured out. But it was decades of diets, trips up and down the scale, feeling self-conscious, having having confidence issues the entire time, and many different attempts, and probably, I don't know, 100 different dietary approaches. And so by the time I gave up, I kind of actually support that decision, because it was like, what was I going to do? Just keep on doing this for the rest of the decades of my life, up and down, up and down. I was exhausted from that journey.
Yeah, so it wasn't necessarily you just deciding at a young age that you were big and you were going to be big and that's just what was going to happen. You were trying, you were following advice, jumping to different diets. It wasn't for a lack of trying.
Oh, absolutely. So much effort and focus on all of that. And wanting those good reasons, we as coaches, we do have to figure out that deep why, but we also have to have the correct method. And so I think once I started realizing what the right approach was, and that, it was about hormones, about fixing your base hormone issues. It wasn't about calories necessarily. And once I figured out what an uphill battle it was, I was actually quite angry that, that I didn't have access to the right skills, because I could have avoided a lot of health problems earlier in my life.
Yeah, so let's talk about the health problems. What were you dealing with as you were going through the, crazy yo-yo dieting and always kind of, gaining on the back end?
Yeah, absolutely. So just wasn't feeling good. Just energy was very low. And just mindset was in the tank. Lots of depression. Had been on antidepressants several times throughout my life. And really thought that there was no hope. And I can look at that situation. I can look at how much food affects mood right now. Because when I think about what the underlying condition was, it's an inflammation. And to me, that inflammation affects the brain and affects your mood. And so I think that figuring out how to get into ketosis, figuring out the tools of the fasting, figuring out the nutrition and getting the correct nutrients for my brain, because this is all energy. This is how we utilize energy, was a huge issue for me. So that was a big part of that story, was just was a pretending. I've always, I enjoy people. I'm very social. I enjoy connecting with people. And that part of me never died, but I think that the cloud of depression and low self-esteem was always like a secret battle that I was dealing with. And that it absolutely tied into things that my body couldn't do, like being nervous about if I was with my kids at an amusement park, not being able to fit. And so I didn't want to try to do the rides, being nervous to fly and travel, but this is the seatbelt going to fit? Am I going to have to ask for the extender? And so just always having these other self-doubts and fears. And so it was really mentally a struggle to just be at that morbid obesity point and to have the low energy and the low mood that came with it.
Yeah, terrible. No, it's such an unfortunate place. We see so many people in that place today because of the guidelines and everything that they're taught. We talk about this all the time on the show. I have more than a decades of experience of working with a metabolic cart, so I was able to help measure people's metabolic rates, and we could identify very early on when I was starting in 2007, 2008, if somebody was over dieting, if they were calorie restricting too much, they would reduce their metabolic rate, and we would see that all the time. And so whatever program they were doing would be really hard to get good success long term. So people are probably sick of me talking about that. I want to hear in your own words, with some of the diets that you were doing, almost certainly most of them, if not all of them, were some version of calorie restriction. Why does that not work long term?
Oh yeah, that is so good. So I love what you're saying, because it has to do with energy, having a lifestyle that is robust in energy versus having a lifestyle that you're going in the opposite direction. And so what the body adapts, like on a calorie restricted type of diet, it actually gets used to conserving. It goes into conserve mode. And so you actually will end up in a much worse situation where you will end up maybe eating a very small amount and still not losing weight. And so there's kind of like your body has a thermostat, and this thermostat has to do with your metabolism. And so doing a restriction approach, and it puts your body into this starvation mode where it just feels like, hey, conserve every little bit of energy. And so you've got a real problem, because now your energy is even lower, but you're putting all this pressure on yourself to maybe exercise more or do more things if you think that you're in this high motivation. And then you literally just will start gaining weight on, if you are eating just a normal amount of food, your rate has gotten so low that then you're going to continue to have these issues. And it's not going to move the dial, and you're not going to lose weight, and you're going to feel like crap. So you're going to have a double whammy on top of those.
Yeah, no, that's very well explained. You already said kind of the low energy, but in hindsight, when you look back, especially when you describe metabolism really well as like a thermostat, do you recall feeling some of those symptoms, like not only the low energy, but feeling cold hands and feet, cravings going up through the roof, or like really good motivation, maybe when you start the program, or especially like on Monday, and then by Thursday, it's so much harder and cravings are even higher. Do you identify with all of
It's
those
like
symptoms?
You think that you're crazy, Casey. You think that you're like a split personality because you have all this raw motivation. I'm gonna, hit this goal, and maybe you text your friend, I'm gonna lose 10 pounds by blah blah blah. And maybe you make a chart and figure out if I lose this amount a week, and so you kind of plan this whole out. You kind of get this this obsession, and you're full of this motivation, and then you restrict. Your hormones swing the other way. Okay, the hormones will always win. And so if you are over restricting and doing too much, then you will need that quick energy. Those cravings are actually to protect you. Okay. And so we know that once we've got our food choices under control and you're, eating in carnivore foods, you're not going to have as much issues. But before we knew that, we were going into those binge, or if you're just in a straight up binge, you don't care. Your body doesn't care. It's just quick energy right at that moment, carnivore or not carnivore, faster or not faster. And so you feel like you're actually two separate people. And so then you have more self-esteem issues because you feel like a failure. You weren't a failure. Your body is strong and trying to protect itself. And so you just were pulling all the wrong levers and continuing this insanity. And it's a cycle, because then you binge, and, then you have some issues with that. And then you just end up kicking yourself. You did not learn. Nothing was learned. And so that's how we kind of look at failure right now, or mistakes right now. It's like, as long as you learned, those are the questions. Where were your cravings at? Where was your energy at? I run into people that overfast. And so that's kind of the hands and feet and the core cold. And if they're kind of, pushing on that too much without having the feasting lever in there and without paying attention to their fast. And so I think that it's so important that we learn from it, because otherwise it just becomes an endless up, down, and cycle with no way out, and you feel trapped and you feel hopeless.
I frankly think it makes a lot of people in my industry a lot of money. If you had really good results with me last January when you were super motivated and you did really great for like a month until your weight loss stalled and your cravings went through the roof, you might think back like 6 months or a year later, like, oh, I was doing so well with that one trainer who sold me all those sessions. Maybe I should go back to him. Maybe I should hire him again and have better willpower this time, without realizing everything that you said. Those hormones are very, very powerful. And they work both ways. Like, your hunger hormone will make you eat. It is going to make you eat. But your fullness hormones make you stop. Like when we go to a Brazilian steakhouse and you literally are eating the most delicious food and you can't even take one more like tiny bite of delicious meat. It works both ways, and they're very strong and very powerful hormones that will make you think about food nonstop until you eat, or they'll make you stop eating altogether.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we've got to get our healthy hormones. We've got to get those in balance. So I love what you're talking about here, because there's a way out. We can change our metabolism. We can increase that rate. And we can get off of that crazy up and down roller coaster.
Absolutely. We totally can. So let's go back to your own story. You were introduced to a book that I have very near and dear to my heart as well. How in the world were you able to get off of this pattern of like dieting and find something that actually worked for you?
Yeah. So I had an injury, and I had a meniscus tear. I'd been over exercising when I was like kind of at a high weight. And so I was thinking I was going to go the surgery route. And so I had a consult to go on that. But again, a false hope, Casey, because how many people do we know that have had that sleep surgery, or they've had that bypass and they still struggle? It did not fix their relationship with food, their relationship with their self, nor their nutrition, nor their food addiction. And so they're still in that same spot. So I can even look at that and think, that probably really wouldn't have worked for me long-term anyways. But I've always done really well in community. I've always done really well. I'm having like an accountability or a buddy. And so I did have a super smart friend who was really good on science. It said, hey, this is about the hormones. This is about insulin. And let's look at this book, the Dr. Fung's book, The Obesity Code, to help us really understand these root causes. So the science grabbed me. And the support systems grabbed me. And so setting out to do something with other people was important. And so that's when I started setting out to trying some of these fasting protocols. I would join groups on Facebook and there would be some group fasts that I would join in on. And my message and my method has become so refined over time. It's just gotten better. And so that those early times, I definitely think I made a lot of mistakes. I would not go about it that way anymore. And I overfasted during that period of time as well. But yeah, it was a step-by-step process. And so just getting into that intermittent fasting lifestyle was so important, having that support system. And then the nutrition started to come into line. And then later, the ultimate nutrition came into line. It was like the ultimate win for me. So I've been carnivore for, only it'll be about 3 years, but for a short period of time. But having that piece come together was like the ultimate solution for all of it. So I'd gone from 300 to 200 with mostly intermittent fasting with some keto in there mixed in as the dietary approach, but I still had the sweeteners in, I still had this sweet fat combination. And so I was still binging. So my fasts were great. I felt so good when I got into that fasting zone, but when I was eating, I still was getting off and making bad choices. And so I didn't have that confidence quite yet, and didn't have what I would think of as maintenance confidence, because I knew if I let the fasting part drop, that my maintenance was going to drop on me too.
It's so interesting that you were able to buy into Dr. Fung's work when you had tried so many other diets. What made this stand out? What was it about the science that really grabbed your attention?
Yeah, I think because I could tell it was a root cause. I could tell it was just through reading through that, I was convinced of that. And so I think that something about that clicked, that it was the hormones, that it wasn't the food too, because the food is a signaler, and the food signals at your hormones. But I think that it was just enough confidence. And the other thing too, Casey, was that I love the concept of, in the fasting world, a lot of us, like, we're kind of done with macros, calories, tracking. And so that was also very appealing to me, because it felt like something that was doable, that could be a lifestyle forever. And hearing from other people that was like, yeah, I got into this fasting lifestyle, as long as I'm, staying on top of this and doing the work of the fasting, because fasting's not always fun. Like, it's uncomfortable. You have to go about it correctly. And it's like any other habit, like exercise. Like, if you get out of that habit, then you're going to start losing some of the benefits that you have from it. So I think that it seemed much more intuitive. It seemed like something I could do. I was thrilled to not have to be fussing around with macros and calories and things like that. So there was just enough there that's like, yeah, I think this can be a long-term solution.
Wow, that's amazing. Dr. Fung was the first one that explained what I was noticing on the metabolic carts. Why were these people who were doing fasting coming in to measure their metabolic rates? They weren't eating very many calories because they were fasting, but their metabolism wouldn't drop. It would increase by hundreds of calories. And like, you would observe this and be like, what is going on? What is different about this than calorie restriction? Because I'm seeing literally the opposite effect of what I would see on a diet. And it was only the obesity code and understanding how Jason Fung explained the science that I was able to understand what I was seeing. It was crazy.
Isn't it so exciting? And I love it. I'm still explaining that. I explain that at least once a week, couple times a week. And so I love that, because I love that when it's muscle protective, and it's because it's ancestral. And so, I mean, it's in the design, right? And so, but it just doesn't make sense that if you're in these periods of fasting, you need energy and you need strength to go, like, get your prey. And so I think that, when you think about, versus when you're in a starvation mode and the food is just getting less and less and less and less, you need to conserve. And so you need to get smaller and smaller and smaller, so you can almost go into like a hibernative type of a state. But when this is a feast fast approach, and so when your up days, you're really feasting well, then yeah, that's you need the energy and the strength to get that good nourishment for the next feast.
Yeah, totally. And besides his kind of like snarky humor that he has, he's like a little bit sarcastic with the way he says things. And like, our kids' body's so stupid that they need, like, juice boxes between, quarters of a soccer game or whatever. And like, he does so good with the analogies and understanding, like, you have a fridge on your main floor. You also have a deep freezer downstairs, and it's harder to access, but you have like a half a cow down there. You've got tons of calories down there. It's just a little bit less convenient to get to. But once you find it, you can use it. You can eat that food. And that's the way the body eats your own body fat percentage. And like you said, protects the muscle, which again, we were totally observing. We could get people to lose weight like 100% coming from fat, validated on body fat scales, which none of my personal training certifications say you can even do that. And we noticed it all the time. It happens so easily for most people. Now, I want to go back to some of the mistakes you made. You've already explained some of them. Fasting, to me, I explain it as almost like the gold standard. It's something that tends to work for most people. Obviously, a few caveats and things we need to talk about there, but it seems to work really well for most people. But if you're not changing your diet all the way, fasting is going to be so difficult. How are you white knuckling some of those early fasts?
Oh man, yeah, I think I was pulling in all of the tricks that I could. Yeah, things that I realized I don't need to do. So you would kind of over rely on the electrolytes. And then, oh gosh, there was snake juice, right? I actually do like snake juice, but there's kind of a whole philosophy with there that's a little bit of an issue. But so yeah, you would try salts, you would try coffees, you would try, you're swapping one ridiculous for a different ridiculous, and you're trying to kind of game the system if you can, and you're trying to, then you can do, let's do these dirty fasts or something. And it's like, okay, to me, I would much rather do a shorter clean fast and do it well and build up your clean fasting muscle than to do this like partial descriptions of like a little bit of fats, or we can do up to 500 calories, or and so there's all of these different kind of versions of it. So I think I just tried all the tricks in the book and tried a lot of white knuckling, but that's why, so without the right nutrition, I don't think it would have worked. And so I don't, I attribute the maintenance portion of it to absolutely getting my nutrition figured out. And for me, that means abstainer. I'm an abstainer all the way. For me, it was just like, cut that crap out, no sweet and fat together, no nuts. There's so many things on the keto plan that are really addictive and damaging foods. And for me, it's approved. I can have almond butter, or whatever. And so I would just, still wasn't dealing with the hyper palatable food was a real issue for me too. And so that's what I love about carnivore. To me, there are a couple of things in carnivore that are still hyper palatable, but if you're getting to just like normal tasting food that triggered the right satiation when you've had the right amount, then it just puts food in its place. And so just a lot of struggle, a lot of white knuckling, a lot of crazy dieting mentality and applying it to fasting. And so I'm so glad that I don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I can't imagine trying the one without, changing the content of the diet. And, I'm an abstainer as well. We just got back from a vacation. I try to relax when I'm on vacation. We ordered, burger patties and an omelet, and it came with fries, and I didn't say no fries. So the fries came. I figured they look gross. They look really good, excuse me. I had one, and then I had two, and then I had five, and then I dipped it in, ketchup. And then like I was emptying the cup of fries into my mouth at the very end. And it's like, I don't know if I'm an addict of food. I just know that I continued eating that further than I wanted to, and I couldn't really stop until every single one was gone. So that to me is close enough to say like I really am better off with 100% than I am even trying like 90%.
I love it. And I love how you define that. That is so important, because kind of trending in the space right now is food addiction, right? And we work with these specialists that can help us to understand, like, psychologically, what are the tools to have a healthy relationship with food. We don't need to call it food addiction. So I like what you said, because we can just say that this is an issue of hyperpalatable foods, and of foods that just there's not a stop sign on them. And so whether we have to feel it's our deepest, darkest secret, we can't control ourselves, or whether we're just like, no, this is just a food like the commercial. Literally, you can't have just one. That's by design. And so I agree with that. It's just a not for me. My life is so much simpler and better if I'm just like, not for me.
Yeah, simpler. That's a great way to say it. I love that.
Mhm.
So tell us about your transition over to carnivore. That obviously is such a game changer for so many people. Low carb, great. Keto, even better for a lot of people. It can get some weight loss. Still, for most people, didn't really solve all the niggling issues until they went more carnivore, and then magically, wonderfully, unexplainably, all of these things just change, get better. Tell us about your experience with carnivore.
Oh, it's so great. So my friend Tiffany Henschel, I'd met her on a fashion board on Facebook. And it was kind of cool, because I actually did have pictures of myself when I was quite large, because I was taking pictures of outfits and things like that. And so sometimes people, when you're in a size 26, you're 300 pounds, you don't want any pictures of you taken anytime. But I had some from that period of time. Well, she was a faster and she was carnivore, and she chronicled her journey in very vivid detail on a private Facebook group. And so I got to hear and see somebody going through the transition. And so hers was a journey of food freedom, and hers was a journey of confidence, and just feeling so different around food and not controlled by the food, like those fries we were talking about, right, Casey? And so this was just cool to see her day-to-day experience with this. So I was like, I want to feel like that, because I was stuck in keto treats, artificial sweeteners, and I was ordering these sugar-free chocolates and stuff. Russell Strovers and Reese's, they're made for diabetics. You can have all these. And so I was just stuck in that. And so I just was still like a slave to food. Like I had done really well. I had lost at least 100 pounds, was kind of struggling in the 190s, couldn't really, was kind of in and out with that. And so I decided to try it in January 2021 for the 30 days. And that's a World Carnivore Month. A lot of people will do this, like give it a shot, And so what happened is I felt so good. My fasts were a little bit harder at first. I had to kind of back to maybe like a 14 or a 16-hour fast when I was first getting started with it, but was able to layer in a bunch of things. So I was able to do my workouts. It was supporting my workouts. I think I was getting, once you're in that carnivore diet, that's so supportive for muscle. So that was getting better. And was just feeling better. Mood was feeling better. Even it was like another level. It just took everything to another level. And so that's like when people are like, well, do I have to go 100% carnivore? I'm like, of course not. You do you. I do carnivore, you do you. But man, I'd love you to try it. If you just tried it for 30 days, 90 days, because so many people they just reached this other spot that they didn't get with the fasting and the keto approach. So it was a relief to not have the sugar and to not have the sweet and not have the keto treats, to have that gone. I didn't miss it. I felt more satisfied eating more meat and eggs, and so I don't know, my satiation was better. Everything just felt easier and more neutral. Food became even more neutral, but still, like, I love it. Absolutely delicious, but it just was no longer controlling me.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. You hear that story so many times. It doesn't sound like the transition was very difficult for you.
Yeah, not too bad. I had done a program called Keto Gains that they had given me a macro goal of a certain amount of animal protein. And so in the 6 months leading up to it, I was eating, I think I was supposed to be having like 150 grams of muscle meat already. And so that was nice because I had a good period of crowding out with that. And I love that, the priming concept, the crowding out concept. And so I think that that's why my transition was fairly easy. I had diarrhea. I had that for loose stools for probably about 6 months. But I don't know, it was a good transition. I didn't go through a lot of the keto flu or any of those kinds of things. The fasting was a big part of my life already. And so that sort of layered in fairly easily.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I've heard you talk about the crowding out thing before, and I think that's really important and really underrated. Like, we could argue all day about plant anti-nutrients and oxalates and lectins and all that stuff, but if we just think, like, if you eat a salad, that is literally taking up space that you could have had something more nutrient dense, being like red meat or something like that. And we don't tend to think about that. Like, forget even if it's causing harm or not causing harm, which it probably is to begin with. Even if it's not, it's space that you could have used something else to use in that place.
Agree. Yeah, completely. And that was a thrill to figure out, like, nope, I can just up my meat and feel so much better and not have any bad effects. I think for me, the salads and the greens were actually kind of a carb addiction thing. I think that I wanted that volume from all of those foods, and I would put a lot of fat on them. I'd put a lot of nuts on it. I'd use a lot of like my hyperpalatable keto foods to make my salads really froofy and fatty, and they were not doing me any favors.
Totally. I think it was Dr. Chafee who originally kind of explained this. Like, do you like vegetables? You like vegetables when they're dipped in oil and covered in salt and with nuts and, other things that come with it. If nothing else, the vegetable might be the only vehicle for the things your body's really, truly actually
Yeah.
craving. I don't see a lot of people like nibbling on Brussels sprouts by themselves. You know what I mean?
No, it's all because I wanted that fat, right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
I definitely, I like the high fat carnivore. Have to have enough animal fat. I feel so good. It's so good for my mood. It's good for my fast. And so I think you're right. I think the vegetables were just like a little bit of carby in there, but more of my body was just needing that fat.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. When did you decide that you wanted to start sharing your message, get into coaching, and then how did you and Raymond hook up, and how did you develop some of your programs?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started so I was on Instagram to start with. I feel like a carnivore, like Instagram's the place to be. And so I had noticed different profiles just when I was curious about it. My friends had reached out to me, Brett Lloyd and Lady Carnivore. So the Thankful Carnivore, Lady Carnivore were like the top two accounts that I really kind of camped out on because I loved their, both of them had a lot of mental health wins. And that was what was calling out to me. And that was what I really wanted, was that mental health piece of it. So I started, I did a challenge with Vanessa Spina. This was actually really funny because it was in the carnivore world. I don't know if you remember, it was called the MCT challenge. And so she did this little period of time where, yeah, it was this wild. So MCT is not carnivore, so it's kind of wild, but I decided to chronicle my journey through that. And so that was when I first started. So a lot of people actually got to know me through that. And I think I, I think I went from 170 to 160 or something. I kind of dropped my weight and I did my measurements and I did all that, put my pictures up and all that kind of stuff. So it's back there somewhere in the files. You can find that. But what was interesting about that MCT experiment was I was doing, other than the MCT, I was mostly doing lamb. And I just felt so good on that. I had the great results. And so that was my first inkling that I kind of like this Instagram thing. This is a ton of fun to, take on a challenge and do it with other people and give your feedback and whatnot. So I had heard, I had seen Raymond and the Laura Primal, another account that was really active at that time, with Bella. I had started to see their stuff on Instagram, and she had something on there about the challenge. And I was like looking through there, and I actually joined it kind of on accident. It's like, click this, click this, click this. I was like, oh, I'm in the challenge. Oh, okay. Just kind of out of nowhere. And so that was in July of 2021. And I had the fasting piece down, but there were certain fasts that I always wanted to be able to do, a rolling 48 fast. And so this is where you're doing the alternate day pattern and you do it for, you count your rolls and stuff. And as a faster, I've always been like, oh, I wanted to try to do that. I tried and just fall on my face and wasn't able to do it. And so came into Bella's group, started learning about feasting and priming, applied that to my fasting. And then all of a sudden I could do alternate day fast. All of a sudden I could do rolling 48s. I was doing a rolling 48 fast with a lion diet. And so it was just like more challenge as I was getting excited about that. And so I just became one of those little super fans that was like, pick me, pick me, pick me, that, when there was time to share, like I had to share. And so it happens all the time. We see it still, we're still running our chisel program. We're still running these things. And, we just have these people that it just clicks with. Right. And so I was somebody that it just clicked with. I had met Raymond earlier on, probably that spring, because I was actually in one of the Facebook groups on about carnivore, and I was starting to share my story. I was so excited. I was turning 50 and looking better than I was when I was a teenager, and was excited about that. Had the bikini pictures to show it off or whatever, and it was kind of a thing. And so I had put my story and my stuff up on some of the groups, but it was shut down because there was fasting, because the fasting was included in it, and it wasn't allowed. So I figured out that like fasting is the F word in the carnivore community. Like you can't talk about it. And I felt so frustrated because people were reaching out to me and they were saying, how did you go about this? And how did this go for you? And I wanted to talk to them, but I literally was muted on like a thing, And so I just kind of had to sit there. I could still see my post and see it get thousands of likes and see everybody post their questions, but I couldn't respond to them.
So frustrating.
Yeah. And so finding Bella's group was like, okay, this is not where we can talk about fasting, and we can talk about over fasting. We can talk about when it's too much, when it's not a good time to fast, and the safety, so we can talk about all elements of it, but just having a group that was fasting friendly was incredible. So I think having just the story and the background, and I think that as a gang that people were really excited to have a lady talk about fasting, because there's different issues with women with fasting. And so, yeah, I just have always had people reach out to me for one-on-one type of mentoring. I've been a mentor since I had started the journey. And so just having a chance to do that, like officially and in something that could actually be something that I do for my work, was super exciting and invigorating. And then I saw what Raymond was teaching, but I wanted to have a program. And so I loved the steps that he was doing. He was helping people with these certain patterns and routines, but I could see it, and I could see the organization, the program, and how it would all like actually how I could explain it, because we've been explaining it over and over and over. And so we wanted to put it in a workshop form. And so what we did is we developed together where we wrote it all out, and we wrote out, why this fast is great, why priming matters, what it does for you. And so then we just offered this as an enhancement for members if they wanted to go the deep dive into it. Of course, we're there to explain. We teach on it, as much as we possibly can. But it's for some people, they just really wanted to read that information to figure out why does this even work? And that was how we developed the Chisel program.
That's amazing. Well, I told Raymond when he appeared on our show that when the two of you got together, there was a really special synergy that happened. You can definitely tell that the 1 + 1 of the two of you definitely equals 3. You guys work together really well. Your presentation was amazing. I think most people who are listening to the show understand fasting, kind of how that works, understand feasting. That's really important, not to restrict yourself when you are eating your calories. I thought the most important piece of your presentation, again, I find this to be underappreciated, talked about. Nobody really tends to talk about is the priming. Can you explain what the priming is?
Oh, absolutely. Oh my goodness. It's so foundational. So we take it as a 2-week period of eating 3 meals a day plus carnivore meals, and you're not letting any hunger happen at all. And you're kind of filling up. So it's kind of like a hypernutrition, and it's all carnivore. And so, usually it's 2 weeks, but it depends on people. Sometimes it can last longer, sometimes it can be shorter. So you're getting like your baseline set. I feel like you're getting every nook and cranny nutritionally filled up. And it just does so much because people are usually coming from under eating and dieting. And so not only, but it's the ultimate crowd out, Casey. It's the ultimate because there's no carbs in this zone. There's no sweeteners in this zone. And so not only are you hyper nutrition, you're getting all this carnivore nutrition on board, you're also getting a nice long break from the addictive foods and from the foods that had you under their thumb. And so if you're going to take on priming for 2 weeks before you start dealing with trying to work through head hunger, with trying to work through your own emotions when you're in a fasting period. So we're doing this first. It gives you a nice long break from that addiction component. And then we step into the natural satiety hungers and feel like actually listening and paying attention to your body, getting that relaxing feeling when the hormones set in. They're saying you're full, you've had enough, you're good.
Interesting. So it's recommended for 2 weeks. I imagine most people that you start with probably go, okay, 3 times a day, as much as I want. Like that sounds great. What is like the average period of time that somebody comes back to you begging you, like, please, can we get off some of these meals?
Usually by week 1,
Week one.
they're getting there. Yeah. And you're right. It sounds like such a party and it sounds so good, but it's hard work. And that's why we like doing it in community and like holding each other accountable for that. Do not weigh during this period of time. It's like the ultimate permission though. So it is really emotionally challenging, and it's also just giving yourself this self-love and this promise that you are nourished from here on out. You are nourished. That so it helps you deal with the scarcity mindset. It helps you deal with this restriction mindset, and so it's actually reprogramming a lot mentally as you're going through the process as well.
Yeah, and it can be a little bit weird when you're first starting out on carnivore. You don't think you should be able to eat 8 eggs or 3 burger patties, or it seems like so much food, but you have to remember the crowding out thing. You're taking out the bun and the sides and all of these other things. And so you might be a little bit surprised when you're first starting on carnivore how much you can get down. It might be more than you were expecting.
I agree completely. And I feel like that's the issue with carnivore. With the number one issue is under eating, because it is so satiating and because you're not used to that mentally. That's exactly right. The amount of portions that you can be eating when you're priming, when you're first getting started, it has some cognitive dissonance. And so this is kind of confronting that cognitive dissonance at the same time. And I mean, we do see the appetite goes down over time. It doesn't always stay, but it's like you're behind. It's like everything's behind. It just needs this super saturation period.
Yeah, which is why people need to have their expectations of what they might see on the scale in check.
Yeah.
You might notice that when you start carnivore, you might be gaining weight because your body is replenishing nutrients. And, we talk about muscle mass as lean mass, but there's lots of things that are lean mass. Your bones might get a little bit more dense. They might be building connective tissue. So there's a lot going on. And I don't think the scale is the best tool. I don't think it's the absolute worst tool, but people need to keep in mind that can definitely happen when they're getting started.
Yeah, we see it all the time, and that we really want people to release that and to just kind of look at, their end goal. You kind of want to begin with the end in mind and see that your end goal is going to be a natural eater, and it's going to be natural appetite, and it's going to be getting all this artificial and the processed food out, and having your entire life based on whole, good foods that nourish your body.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I purposely left this out of the introduction. You are also an author of a book. Can you tell us about your book and what you were trying to convey and who you were trying to get that message out to?
Yeah, absolutely. So my cookbook is available on Bella's Mighty Network. It's called the High Fat Carnivore Cookbook. And so for me as a mom, I just wanted to have delicious recipes with a lot of variety, because variety is a big issue for us on the carnivore diet. And so I had a lot of things in there: muffins, waffles, family-friendly casseroles. And for me, I thrive on high-fat carnivore. And so trying to find ways to make fat palatable. And so I have a lot of recipes in there using tallow. You have our classic butter bites. So yeah, just having treats, variety, and lots of different options in the kitchen. I feel like involving the kids in the kitchen is one of the best things you can do to get them to enjoy nutrient-dense food. So yeah, it's just full of great cooking ideas and recipes for the family and for people that are just wanting to have some variety in their carnivore journey.
That's amazing. I love asking parents this question. Are your kids suffering by heading towards a more animal-based or carnivore diet, or over time, do they themselves select eating that way?
Yeah, absolutely. They are thriving eating more animal. That's all we provide at home, but we don't really restrict what they do when they're with their friends. And well, some of my kids are young adults, so it's on them. They have a self-awareness. They know how it makes them feel. And so they can see it in their skin. They can see it in their energy, their sleep, their little joints get achy if they're eating carbs and sugar. And so for me, that's the hugest win of them realizing, they're like, yeah, I got to cut that stuff out. That's not working for me.
That's amazing. I keep hearing that story from so many different parents where it's like there might be a transition period, but for the most part, the kids understand. They're really smart and they know how they feel, and they end up preferring eating that way for all of those reasons that you listed.
And
Emily,
bacon.
this is a what's that? And bacon,
Bacon,
exactly.
bacon, yes.
Twisted bacon is just the best. This has been a fantastic conversation. I love your personality. I love your desire to bring this message out, not just to use it for yourself and your family, but to share with others and to make it really accessible for people. I think is really important. So I'm so glad you took time out of your busy life to appear with us today. Where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Yeah, Instagram is going to be the spot. So I'm at Healed by Meat. So feel free to reach out to me there. And yeah, I've got a YouTube coming up pretty soon. I'm going to be doing a podcast myself. So a lot more things that are going to be happening and will be out there.
That's that's fantastic. Are you excited for the podcast?
Oh my gosh. Yes. I've been loving it. It's been so much fun. I mean, I understand why you're so happy now.
It's so much fun. Like from the first episodes when people like Dr. Sean Baker, Dr. Bill Schindler said, yes, I would absolutely love to be on your show and to talk to some of these rock stars that you and I look up to. It's wonderful. You will love the process. It's so much fun. It's very, very addictive.
Oh, and I've
Better
got
than
you to help me out too.
I will be there to help. It's better than food addiction. It's better than sugar addiction. It feels better than an entire container of French fries. Emily Harveaux, amazing to have you on the show. Like I said, it's amazing to hear your story and to have you be so bubbly and open and honest about it is really awesome. Now that you're sharing that with other people, it's really wonderful. So glad that we were able to more formally invite you to the show this time. Thank you for taking time out of your day to be here today and be on our show. We really appreciate you.
You are a kindred spirit, Casey. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming by. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.